I always wonder why I began writing poetry, really. Because I wasn't particularly interested in poetry at school. It was something that we had to do, but we didn't write poetry. I mean, other people wrote poetry. What I enjoyed at school was reading out poetry, reading out poems, and poems as like theatre, really, and doing choral verse and that sort of thing. I never thought I could ever write a poem. But then I suppose what happened was I got interested in the words and in language. And for instance, I'd be thinking of the word an alligator. I'm thinking, an alligator, what's an alligator? Sounds like elevator. Elevator, escalator, elevator. So I can imagine then in my mind's eye an alligator on an elevator or an escalator going up an escalator in a shop. So I imagine these fierce elevators. So as the beginning of a poem. And then you think, that's a funny idea. And you think of an anaconda on a Honda, or the word otter. That's a funny word, otter. Right at rotter. A lot of otters. And that leads to writing a poem. So you develop it. So I was never sort of wanting to write stories on, even though I have written stories, I was more interested in just the words themselves and the language, what it leads to in the next thing. And so I always carried a notebook around me, and I didn't start writing until I was 19 or 20. I wasn't writing poems at school, or wasn't a very particularly bright child, intellectual or anything. I just liked stories. I liked hearing stories. But I was lazy. Good, I was lazy. But probably quite imaginative. And if ever I'd probably try to be clever, give the clever answer rather than the right answer, which you're not supposed to do at school. Don't do that. So I always have a little piece of paper with me and scribble and draw, and my books are all full of little drawings and illustration, little notes, little things. At the back of a book will be little face chiseled out of ash. Lots of things, nothing at all. Don't mean anything, but you write them down and get in the habit of writing things down. And then later on, possibly, the thing may develop. I always write not always in pencil, but in pen. I always write on paper. Then eventually, when I think there's a poem there, I'll then go to the computer and put it into the computer. I don't like doing that too early on the PC because it looks like a published poem. It looks like it's printed. Looks like, ooh, it's good. Why change it? Because I'm older and not used to computers anyway, and word processing, I can't type, and hopeless. But it doesn't matter for poetry. I'm not writing War and Peace, Well, having said that, I might. But so poems are good because they're short and lots of crossings out. That's the best thing about poetry. It's the crossings out. And I always keep the crossings out because that may be the next poem.